The Rule Zero conversation is a unique quirk of casual EDH, trying to find out where everyone lands between a pile of random cards and an optimized CDH deck. And personally, I like to keep this Rule Zero talk as short as possible. I think it's best for gameplay experience, player engagement, and EDH overall. I want to talk to you about the benefits of minimizing Rule Zero and the impacts of that on you and other players, and how I think brackets play into that. This is also part of an ongoing debate Alex and I are having. There are a few videos where we've gone back and forth about information in EDH and Rule Zero conversations. His last video on the topic and our previous videos are not required reading for this to make sense. I will be addressing some of his points directly, and I will provide all of the necessary context. I even had Alex check this script to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything he said. Isn't that right, Alex?
Yes.
But I'll link his video below if you want to check it out after this one. Before I tell you about that, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor.
Yes.
Oh, Alex, I didn't realize you were still here. I got the sponsor segment. Don't worry, you don't need to be here for that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
This video is sponsored by Card Castle, the easy way to sort your cards digitally.
Yes.
Yes, right. You can scan your cards and it puts them into a digital library, making it easy to search up and figure out what cards you actually own.
Yes.
Alex, I got the ad read. You don't need to jump in. It's all good.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You good, bro? Anyway, Card Castle is super useful with multiple tags. I can sort my collection by binders or boxes, and then I know exactly where a specific card is.
Yes.
Huh? Did you see that? Anyway, if you sign up to Card Castle, you will get 1,000 scans for free and 3 tags. So if you have 2 trade binders and 1 box of playable cards, that can be sorted without paying a single cent.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Bro, you good? Also, if you use my link, you'll get 1 free month of premium access. Additionally, Card Castle has this card sorting robot, which your LGS might have. If you want to check to see if your game store has one, there's a link to that below as well. Thanks to...
Yes. 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 Yes.
Alex, are you okay? What is going on?
Yeah, I'm fine. Excited to see the finished video.
Right. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the video. In the past, Rule Zero conversations were pretty tricky. Lots of people had different ideas of how to organize the power of decks. If you Google 1 to 10 power scale, you'll find tons of posts and charts, and people really didn't have a good consensus on what a 7 out of 10 was. This brings me to some problems EDH has as a casual format. You really want to match power levels. You want everyone to have a similar idea of the power level their deck has and how powerful your deck is. It can feel pretty bad if you play a game where you had a 0% chance to win and there was nothing you could do because your deck was completely outclassed. And this is something brackets are fairly good at doing. Alex and I are in agreement on that.
Yes.
But where we differ is Alex likes to further the Rule Zero talk by explaining more about his deck, like the main strategy, how explosive it is, and any wacky twists and turns your deck might have. Personally, I try to avoid extra Rule Zero talks when I can. Part of the reason is brackets solve most of the Rule Zero issues. I know they're not perfect. Should Chains of Mephistopheles be a game changer? I mean, like, maybe, but it's also a $500 reserve list card that most players don't even know about. And if you are familiar with it, you probably know the card is very powerful and likely not appropriate for a Bracket 2 game. When I tell you my deck is Bracket 2, you immediately know a lot of information. My deck will not have any game changers, it won't blow up all your lands, I'm not chaining extra turns, and there are no 2-card combos. So when I play something like a Basalt Monolith, you don't need to know that this card could go infinite with one other piece, because we're in Bracket 2. You also know that you have plenty of turns on average before a lethal strike will come your way. Of course, you still gotta pay attention. A fast opening or the perfect hand could speed up a deck. But in general, you got some ideas about how my deck will play out in a game of Commander. Brackets alleviate a lot of the mental burden in casual EDH. All stuff Alex and I agree on.
Yes.
So you might ask, what is the big deal with telling your opponents that you are a late game control deck? Or you are a combo deck using this card, or that your list has a specific gimmick. And my issue is, why do you want that extra information? Now, Alex might say that letting people know his Shroom deck is very powerful late game avoids cheesy wins, where players simply don't know how to focus down his deck early. This isn't from his video, just we were discussing the topic over Discord, right, Alex?
Yes.
And this makes total sense from his perspective and experiences. But when I see Rule Zero talk, it's used to be exclusionary. Oh, I don't want to play against Mill, Combo, Theft, Infect, Voltron, Control, Elves, blah blah blah. You can almost always find someone who dislikes any type of deck you can imagine. I've read a lot of YouTube comments, and I promise you, someone out there has an irrational hatred against the decks and commanders you play. I'll use some of my decks as examples here. My Talmanos deck is an artifact control list built around a salvaging station that often wins with a late game Millennium Calendar combo. This deck is extremely fair. The combo requires a ton of setup and a full turn cycle, and any backup win is extremely grindy and slow, giving players lots of opportunities to interact. The main engine of the deck folds to Graveyard Hate and Artifact Hate, which every color has access to. Each key piece is on board, and you have several turns before the deck will threaten you with anything. But in my description, I said the word combo, and a lot of players immediately associate combos with the fastest, strongest, least interactable combos ever printed. So they use Rule Zero to avoid all combos at all times. I don't even really play combo decks very often. I just happen to like the calendar, and I think the card is funny. To be honest, most wins this deck gets are actually because people don't play Graveyard Hate. Rule Zero is very often used to avoid things, to run away from them. Now, Alex also has a problem with gimmick decks. A deck that does one thing usually wins with that, and then that's about it. He even says,
If giving somebody a synopsis of what your deck does ruins your experience playing it, it wasn't all that interesting a deck to begin with.
and I suppose if the synopsis of a deck ruined the experience, sure, that would probably indicate the deck isn't interesting. But there is fun to be had by keeping a gimmick secret. Recently, I had a patron submit a deck for review that was very odd. The deck played a bunch of cards with plot, and then it has World Purge and Sway of the Stars to clear the board, then cast the plot cards for free, winning with those. This is a gimmick deck. It is blue-white control with a very silly, goofy combo as a finisher. This combo is very slow and requires a lot of mana, and time to set up. I think the deck is funny, and if I got caught off guard by that, it would be fine. Likely, it happened many turns into a game after they had lots of setup, and I would have found it funny if I lost to these Garbo plot creatures. And using Rule Zero to spoil this gimmick is just kind of lame, because what if it wasn't a gimmick, right? What if it was just Azorius control with some random big mana finisher at the end? It would play out functionally the same, and then you get your big mana finisher and you win the game. But you wouldn't have to disclose the finisher, right? Because it's not a crazy, wacky gimmick. It's a boring, normal thing people see all the time. And that's when the gimmicks win the game. Something I think Snail gets hung up on a bit in his video. A lot of what he's saying refers to combos or blindsiding opponents in ways that win the game. And I agree, maybe some people might say, oh, my deck is interesting and crazy, but it's really just a combo with an extra piece. And yeah, that isn't particularly fun or exciting, it's just kind of whatever. But what if your gimmick doesn't end the game? My Esper control list would be an example of that. I think it's really funny the first time someone sees this deck in action, because I will eventually cast Reweave and begin to polymorph, my opponents realizing that I haven't cast any other creatures, and then their minds race as they think of the biggest, scariest thing I can possibly cheat into play, and then they have this look of confusion when I flip over the unspeakable. No, the deck isn't ruined if you play against it twice, or if you knew that this card was coming, because it is a multifaceted control deck with many different lines of play. But I do get joy out of seeing players get surprised by the deck. It is a fun, memorable, social moment. And I think keeping my gimmick hidden is perfectly reasonable since it doesn't end the game. You don't need to know decades of arcane spells and knowledge to beat the unspeakable. It's just a dude. Additionally, if your deck is not a gimmick deck, and it's just any type of straightforward list that plays exactly how the commander was designed to play, then why would you need to explain the deck? Oh, the Dragon deck is a dragon deck? Got it, thanks. Rule Zero talks are only used to expose a deck that does something interesting or unique. If everyone's deck did exactly what it said on the tin, nobody would need a Rule Zero talk. It's fun when I see the Dragon player start casting changelings and crabs, because it's their crab changeling deck. That's cool, and I'll figure it out as you play the deck. So, what does this mean for players? Well, it does a few things. Leaning on brackets to calibrate power levels and avoiding much further discussion means players have to be engaged, think more about what is to come, what players might do, and what might make a more well rounded deck. If your opponents are going to tell you everything outright and say, hey, my deck won't win until this turn, I can't stop you from doing anything, I have no interaction, then yeah, you can just check out of the game, just play your things and not pay attention. But EDH is a social format where you should be discussing things with your opponents and looking at what they're doing. It's really not designed for you to just take a nap when it's not your turn. Imagine a player who lost to Voltron a few times. From then onward, they use Rule Zero to avoid Voltron decks. They might have not put any early game spot removal in their list whatsoever. Whether intentionally or not, they've made a deck weak to Voltron, and then instead of accounting for that and thinking about why their list is struggling against Voltron, they just avoid the deck archetype altogether. And you can imagine a similar situation with any number of other deck archetypes and cards that you could skip out on playing. If you build a deck with a huge weakness and then just avoid decks that can exploit that weakness, you'll never learn how to make a deck without that or how to improve your list. I think these picky EDH players are ultimately less well rounded players and, at worst, can be kind of frustrating to deal with. It is a little lame if you spent money on a deck only to learn that this player refuses to play EDH with you, even though their deck and your deck could totally be in the same pod in terms of power level. Alex mentions that casual EDH players try to substitute knowledge for skill, and players like to leverage that in games, which I think is true. But I also think that's a feature, not a bug. Playing a 4-player free-for-all, singleton, eternal format with a massive card pool will lead to knowledge gaps between players, and that is okay. It is fine to lose to a new card or interaction you've never seen before and learn from it. Maybe you even think that interaction was cool and you want to add the card to your deck. There is nothing wrong with trying to mitigate those knowledge gaps, but just telling people how your deck functions robs them of trying to piece the puzzle together, which I understand is a personal preference, but unless your Rule Zero talk includes a full deck list, people are going to get blindsided by stuff all the time. You got like 65 different non-land cards in like any given deck. Why spoil the most interesting ones? I really hope that brackets streamlining Rule Zero talk will shift the overall sentiment of EDH players towards a more open mindset about what is a reasonable strategy to play in EDH. I genuinely think that the more types of decks you play against and strategies you face, the better you get at the game and deck building. And maybe you find a deck that seems cool and you try it out yourself. I hope it also leads to less new player babying. Sometimes EDH discussions treat new players as drooling babies that need a lot of hand holding. But that's not true. New players are smart. They can figure out what a deck does on the fly. They can handle getting their stuff removed here and there. Of course, everyone learns differently, but if someone thinks that they need more help, they can just ask, hey, is this a combo piece? Mid-game. Because ultimately, if your deck has interaction and card draw, you can probably play in most pods. I mean, every deck is a 7 after all. Plus, it's a 4-player wacky free-for-all casual game with nothing on the line. Losing to some wacky combo someone wanted to show off after they had 10 turns of setup isn't the end of the world. A lot of commenters like to say, Con, how would you like it if I comboed off with a card you didn't know about, or if I stacks locked you out of the game? And the answer is, I would like that very much, within the right context. If I play a bracket 4 game and you stasis lock me, that is fine. I literally signed up for it when I built a deck for the bracket where stasis is allowed. If we played bracket 2 and you stasis locked me after lying about your deck's bracket, then sure, I would be peeved. Or if you lied about a card being a combo piece, or that you had a 2-card combo in your bracket 2 deck, then yes, it would be annoying. But it's all within context, right? If you tell me your deck is bracket 4, I can make assumptions about it. I don't need you to tell me every little twist and turn the deck has. Now this brings me to talk about liars and cheats. Yes, someone can lie about the bracket their deck is in, but Rule Zero talks don't help with that either. You could just lie in your Rule Zero talk as well. If somebody's using brackets to angle shoot, like making a very powerful deck, which is technically bracket 2 so they can cheese extra wins, No amount of Rule Zero is actually going to help solve that. They're just going to lie. I want to suggest a few things you can do instead of additional Rule Zero talk that I think is more useful. One is thinking about what your opponents might do during deck building. Coming up with some contingencies will help a lot in preparing for what your opponents might do. Another option is to talk mid game. I think this is a much better thing to do than pre-game talk, since you can't use mid game talk to avoid mill decks altogether. Instead, you have to realize someone is playing mill and talk to the table. How do we beat this? How fast can their deck go? What tools do you have to avoid getting milled out? You have to play politics, interact with your opponents. It is a social game after all. It forces problem solving in a way that I think leads to much more fun and engaging games and better players. Last suggestion, if you want to play Magic in a way that there are very little knowledge gaps, you're not surprised by things, you can kind of just check out and let things go, boot up Magic Arena, and play Standard. With the increase in power creep, there's usually only going to be one or two viable decks, so you only have to learn the mirror match and one other matchup. All other decks are bad and you'll just beat them anyway. I know EDH has kind of taken over Magic, but there are other formats. If you find that you do not like the experiences you're having in Commander, give another format a try. Of course, this is all just my opinion, and now that you've heard mine, and Alex's if you go back and watch his video, I want to hear yours. Where do you land on Rule Zero talks? How do you use it? Do you find people use it to avoid certain things, or not? Let me know in the comments below. Also, thanks to Alex for lending his voice to this video.
Yes.
And thank you for watching. Additionally, special thanks to my Tier 3 patrons, whose names you see scrolling by here. If you want to be in the Patreon, get in on the credits or the deck reviews like I mentioned earlier in the video, click the link below.